In Unit 1, we'll cover chapters 1 and 2. These are fairly introductory chapters. We'll talk about the entrepreneurial life, and then we'll talk a little bit about integrity and ethics for the course. So let's spend a little time now talking about each one of those. I have a few charts I just want to go through with you. Let's take a look now at the material in Chapter 1. Chapter 1 talks about the entrepreneurial life. What are some of the contributions of small businesses? Well, let's see. They represent 99.7% of all firms with employees. They employ over 50% of the employees in the private sector. They account for 45% of private payrolls. They generate 60 to 80% of the net new jobs over the past decade. They hire 40% of high-tech employees, and they represent 97.3% of all exporters. So you can see that small business makes a significant impact into the overall economy, not only in the U.S., but worldwide. Well, who are entrepreneurs? An entrepreneur is a person who starts and/or operates a business. They are individuals who discover market needs and launch new firms to meet those needs. They are risk takers who provide an impetus for change, innovation, and progress, and we'll come back to this one in just a moment. And all active owner-managers, as founders and or managers of small businesses, are considered entrepreneurs. You can be an entrepreneur also and be a part of a much larger organization, but involved nevertheless in an entrepreneurial activity. So entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship exists in both small and large companies. Let's go back to this risk takers bullet number 3. Most entrepreneurs are considered to be these wild-eyed gamblers, but that's just the opposite of what they really are. Successful entrepreneurs tend to be risk takers, all right, but they're calculated risk takers. They're careful about their risk taking, and they tend to analyze and understand completely the risk that they're taking before they get into it. There's a lot of criteria for defining the size of a business, but for the purposes of this course, we'll define a small business as one that has fewer than 100 employees. They're fairly localized in their operations, except perhaps marketing. And the financing is supplied by one person or a small group, and a small group could be a bank. And it has the potential to become more than a one-person show. So that's a small business by our definition for this course. Less than 100 employees, localized operations, financing supplied by one person or a small group, has the potential to become more than a one-person show. Well, if you want to be an entrepreneur, be aware of these things. It is extremely challenging. It takes a great, deep passion for what you're doing to keep going. In other words, it requires a lot of tenacity. It can run in a family. It can help make the world a better place, and it can make meaning in your life. But let me just explain one thing to you. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. It can be very, very difficult. And the key to success as an entrepreneur, and really in any career field, is more tenacity than it is talent. So just remember that. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes it will be very, very difficult just to keep going. Sometimes a lot of times, you will fail at it. But the key is to keep going, to return, and keep whacking away at it. What are some of the rewards of entrepreneurship? Well, obviously you can build wealth if you have a profitable and successful business or businesses. One of the keys, though, is it can give you personal satisfaction and personal fulfillment. Your ability to contribute not only to your family and your way of life, but to the community. And sometimes we forget about the fact that our service to the community and our contribution to our community, wherever our community is, wherever we're living, is important. And it's one that we shouldn't forget as we get out into the business world and pursuing our careers and wealth or whatever it is we're pursuing. Another reward of entrepreneurship is independence. It gives being an entrepreneur gives you the ability to make your own business decisions, and it also gives you an amount of freedom and escape, perhaps from an undesirable job, or the ability to be creative and innovative with your own company. Now, is being an entrepreneur a good fit for me? Is owning a small business a good fit for me? Well, the questions you have to ask yourself is, what is my passions? Am I passionate about what I'm doing? What is my tolerance for risk? Am I effective in making decisions? Am I willing to take on numerous responsibilities? Will I be able to avoid burnout? So let's go to numbers 3, 4, and 5. Assuming that you're passionate, assuming that you can tolerate risk, then decision making and the ability to do analyses leading up to decisions becomes very important. I know some very, very bright people who are very innovative and creative people, but have a very difficult time making a decision. So they would not ever work very well as an entrepreneur, particularly in business for themselves or alone in business. In a small business or in an entrepreneurial activity, you almost never have a single track of decisions that you're working with. You're working with numerous parallel decisions and responsibilities all the time. So you got to be able to what we used to call multitask in a small business environment. And then lastly, do you have the tenacity? Will you be able to keep going and not burn out? Can you avoid burnout in what you're trying to do? So these are all important questions to ask yourselves before you become an entrepreneur. Now these are some classifications that we use in this course, in this textbook, to define certain types of small businesses. A high potential venture we call a gazelle. It has great prospects for growth, and some small businesses fit into this category. An attractive small firm will provide substantial profits to its owner. Basically, it provides a living for its owner. And we call these an attractive small firm, and there's a lot of small businesses that fit into this category. A micro business is one that provides minimal profits to its owner, and I would have to say, without having any statistics in front of me, that a large portion of the small businesses around us fit into the micro business category. They're just barely providing a profit for the owner to squeeze by. And then a lifestyle business permits the owner to follow a desired pattern of living. This business is one that's structured to allow the owner to live a lifestyle that they prefer. An artisan entrepreneur is a person with primarily technical skills and little business knowledge who starts a business. And you see this quite a bit, particularly with high-tech startups. They take a paternalistic approach. They are reluctant to delegate. We'll come back to this one. They use few sources of capital, have a traditional marketing strategy, focus on personal sales effort, and have a short planning horizon. Those are all characteristics of the artisan entrepreneur. Let's talk about the bullet number 2 just for a little bit. Artisan entrepreneurs are reluctant to delegate, and what you'll find out in small business is that you have to gather around you people that you trust and then allow them to do their job. In other words, delegate work to them, allow them to do their job. The artisan entrepreneur has a difficult time delegating work to other people. In other words, basically what he's saying is, I don't trust the capabilities of that person, nor do I trust that person to do what I want done. They tend to have a traditional marketing strategy, if they have a marketing strategy at all. Artisan entrepreneurs tend to think, my idea is so good the world will like it, and don't tend to not give the marketing component of their plan much attention. Opportunistic entrepreneurs, on the other hand, are persons with both sophisticated managerial skills and technical knowledge who starts a business. Some of you fall into that category. What are their characteristics? Well, they have a broad-based education, scientific approach to problems, willing to delegate, broad view of strategy, diversified marketing approach, longer planning horizon, sophisticated accounting, and financial control. This is one reason that for entrepreneurs it's better to get an undergraduate degree and get out into the business world for a little bit and then come back to do an MBA. In fact, at the Harvard Business School, the MBA students there are encouraged to work and gain some experience before they apply to enter the Harvard Business School. And the reason why is that it gives them a broader based education. It allows them to by going out to work and then go to the MBA, it allows them to build the tools and sets that they will need to become executives and entrepreneurs later on. So you want to have a broad-based education if you're an opportunistic opportunistic entrepreneur, and you want to have a good analytical capability, a scientific approach to problems, be able to take a broad view of strategy, and make sure you understand accounting and financial control. So what are some mistakes that startup entrepreneurs make? Well, let's look at some of these right here. There's 10 of these listed. Going it alone. And number 2, asking too many people for advice. So there you have the streams of both cases here between 1 and 2. It's good to have advisors, trusted advisors, helping you as you become an entrepreneur and start your own company, but you can have too many and you also have not enough. You spend too much time on product development and not enough on sales. I see that over and over again. People who have a good idea, and we'll talk about this as we go through the course. People who have a good idea and think the whole world is going to like it because it's my idea, and fail to do the marketing research that they need to do. You target too small a market is another flaw. You enter a market with no distribution partner, a major issue right there. Number 5 is a major issue. Major mistake that entrepreneurs make. I've seen that mistake. I've made that mistake myself. You overpay for customers. You raise too little capital, or you raise too much capital. You don't have a business plan, or you're overthinking your business plan. Sometimes in the midst of doing a business plan, you can think too much, and it comes a time where you have to stop the business planning and start the business. Well, what's the competitive edge for entrepreneurs? Well, here's what allows entrepreneurs really with small companies, to really be able to maneuver much more quickly than larger companies can. So your ability to have a customer focus, to focus on quality performance, to ensure integrity and responsibility, your ability to innovate and to be global in your operation, and the fact that you can get into a special niche market are all big advantages for the small firm. So when you get started, I'll tell you guys exactly what I tell all of my face-to-face classes. If you think you're an entrepreneur and if you have an idea, now is the time to start it, period. Now is the time to start it. So here's the kind of the timeline that most people look at in your 20s to 25 and early 30s. You got early career concerns, getting education, gaining some experience, getting some financial resources. Then from 30 and up, 35 to 45, you got the later career concerns beginning to pop up, fulfill family responsibilities, all those soccer and baseball and football games, attaining seniority in employment, earning investment and retirement program, all those things begin to kick in. So at some point in time, you have to decide, where am I fitting in all of the cycle, or is it time now for me to break out, and what's going to be required for me to break out? All those questions you have to deal with. But this is kind of the career cycle that we all look at from time to time. You can see the Gen Ys are 20-25s, that's you guys, most of you at least. The Gen Xs are 25-35, baby boomers are 35 and up. Gen Ys, that's you younger guys, the millennial entrepreneurs. Here's some of your characteristics. Technology you're very comfortable with. You tend to be idealistic and optimistic. In other words, you're kind of naive sometimes. Kind of normal for 20 to 25-year-olds. You're more collaborative. You tend to work better in teams, to get together with people and make the most out of that collaborative effort. You build elements of community in the business. You start companies while studying entrepreneurship, and that's another thing I will tell you in just a moment. You fail fast, you learn a lot, and you keep going. Go back to the second to the last bullet. If you think you're an entrepreneur and you have what you think is a good business idea, now is the time to get that idea going, to write your business plan, develop the idea, get your company started. What are some of the characteristics of successful entrepreneurs? Well, let's look at them just for a minute. One is they're moderate risk takers. Another one is they are self-reliant. In other words, they have confidence in their ability to get the job done, and they are tenacious. They have a lot of tenacity. So those are kind of your key to success as an entrepreneur. You're going to be tenacious. You want to have confidence in your ability. You want to be self-reliant, and you want to be a moderate risk taker. Here's some entrepreneurial characteristics from Spinelli and Timmons. What are some of the attitudes and behaviors of entrepreneurs? You see a lot of commitment and determination. That's tenacity. You see leadership. You see opportunity obsession. That's also tenacity. You see a tolerance of risk, ambiguity, and uncertainty. That's kind of the ability to handle risk at some level. You see a lot of creativity, self-reliance, and adaptability, and you see a motivation to excel. So all of these are characteristics of successful engineers. So as you think about entrepreneurs, so as you think about yourself, you might want to think about these different characteristics that we just talked about, throw them up and say, okay, now where do I fit in here? How do I fit in each one of these characteristics? So how do you fail as an entrepreneur? Let's look at these 6 characteristics. Overestimate what you can do. You lack an understanding of the market. You hire mediocre people. You fail to be a team player. Tend to be a domineering manager. You don't share ownership in the business in an equitable way. Let's go to, all of these are pretty obvious to you, I think, but let's go to these last two, number 5 and number 6. And really, I want to hear hit 2 and 3 as well. You're going to fail as an entrepreneur if you don't force yourself to really understand the market you're trying to play into, and that includes the distribution function as well. I can cite to you examples of how this has become an Achilles heel for entrepreneurs. You hire mediocre people in your organization. I'm seeing this right now with friends of mine who are running companies who I've counseled with a little bit in their companies. You are a domineering manager. I've got a good friend right now who has a very successful small company that's growing rapidly, and he's driving himself nuts and also his employees nuts because he's a domineering manager. He's on the factory floor every day yelling and screaming at people, and you can see the type of climate, that type of attitude will develop. I'm going to talk with him over the next year and a half and try to see if I can move him out of that type of management style. Another situation I'm familiar with, have a case going on right now, is that the entrepreneur doesn't share ownership in the business in an equitable way. Most small business owners want to keep 100% of the ownership of the business to themselves. But if you're going to have talented employees, you're going to have to be willing to share ownership in your business. And what that means is that you hire a talented employee who becomes key to your business, and you want to bring him in as a part owner of the business. And many entrepreneurs fail in that category right there. And if that is the situation in your company or in your entrepreneurial activity, I would tell you this is one of the things that will cause you not to succeed in the long run. Mentors, let's talk about that, because I encourage all entrepreneurs to have mentors, people who they can depend upon for guidance. A mentor is a knowledgeable person who can offer guidance from their experience in a given field. They teach entrepreneurs what and how to do as the entrepreneur wants that. They provide entrepreneurs encouragement when needed, and they show them how to avoid mistakes. So a mentor, an experienced person, is a good person to have on your side if you're starting a small company, somebody you can just talk to from time to time with major issues in your company. Let's look at the relationship of success in business and success in life. I want to talk to you just for a little bit about some very important things here. When you get to the end of your entrepreneurial life, if that occurs, and you say you go back to work for another company or you retire, then you want to look back and say, okay, I did all of the things that I did right, and I took the right actions in order to exit this company or this environment properly. And as I evaluate my accomplishments, I want to be honest about those accomplishments. And so as you move forward in your career, be thinking about, these are the things I'm going to look back on. How are they looking right now? You've got to also understand that when you start your company, when you're operating your company, that the nature of your company will reflect your personal goals and your personal values. So ensure that your company and the principles and the core beliefs of your company align with your personal values and values that all your employees can support. You want to craft a worthy entrepreneurial legacy. In other words, you want the tangible items and the intangible qualities passed on not only to your heirs but also to the broader society. In other words, you want your efforts to make a difference in the community, a difference in the state and the country, a difference in how men are able to live. And then you want to make sure that when you begin your entrepreneurial effort, begin the effort with the end in mind, knowing full well that the day will come, and by the way, much sooner than you think, when you'll be looking back and saying, okay, how did I do? What did I accomplish? Did I do the things that really count, not only for me, but for the people around me?